الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. I'm going to try to answer this question. So the question is this, hypothetical questions. If I had the option to study only two philosophers in detail from the history of Western philosophy, I'll limit myself to Western philosophy. And because that's my background, but by Western philosophy, I also include in it medieval philosophy, Christian and Muslim, and probably Jewish as well. But I don't know much about Jewish philosophy, really. Okay, so if I had limited time, for example, or even if I have a lot of time, which two philosophers should I concentrate? You had to start with anyway. Which two philosophers I would. So I'm not here to. I'm not in the business of telling people what to do and what to read. But if I had to choose two philosophers from the entire history of Western philosophy, as to their importance, in a sense, if I can master them, meaning master their ideas, especially their concepts, their method and technique, then I can handle anything, any other philosopher or idea within this tradition. So that's what I mean. So what would be those two philosophers? So I'm going to choose one from the modern philosophy and one from the ancient philosophy. And then obviously you can ask me a further question if I had only a choice to restrict, if I was compelled to restrict myself to only one, which one of these two I will choose. So that would be another question, but at the moment I'm just going to talk about these two. So probably in this session I'm just going to talk about the first one and then the second one. So I'm not going to even tell you the second one in this until I start talking about him or her. Probably there's not going to be any her, but anyway. Okay, so the first philosopher I'll choose is Aristotle. Student of Plato. And I'll roughly give my reasons for choosing him rather than, for example, Plato, for example, to study in detail. So I'll just give you my reason and the basic explanation. I won't go into too much detail, but if you want me to elaborate, if you want me to elaborate on anything, you can ask me to do that. Okay. I think the first reason is that Aristotle is really in a sense, I know that it's not true literally, but in a sense he's the first philosopher. First philosopher in the sense that he institutionalized philosophy or define it as a discipline. with the different branches and things. And I think he does this also because he's the first historian of philosophy. So he's a philosopher, but also a historian of philosophy in the sense that um, he relates what he's doing to what went before him and develop his thought based on that, and see his own thought as a sort of summation of philosophy up to that point. So his philosophy in general, he, in a sense, and that's how he sees it, but I think we can also partially see it in that way, the summation of all that went before in Western philosophy. And also he sees his philosophy as the, basically the culmination of philosophy as such, and what will come after would be just the elaboration or development of his thought and what he has done. In that sense, he's quite like Hegel, for example. That's how Hegel sees himself as well. But obviously, Hegel doesn't have that centrality which Aristotle has. So these are first two reasons. These are the first two reasons. The first one is actually the first one to, in a sense, the first philosopher. In the technical sense of the word, who basically turned philosophy into a discipline with its boundaries, with its techniques, methods, etc. So in that sense, he's the first philosopher. Secondly, he's also the first historian of philosophy in the sense. So by studying his philosophy, you are also studying basically what went before him. And he also sees his philosophy as the culmination of all that. So in a sense, to understand his philosophy, you would also you would have to understand what went before him, even if through his eyes. Okay. From this we can come to the fourth point, that since he saw himself as the culmination of what came before him and the beginning of what will come after him, that's why he became sort of the foundation. His work became the foundation of what was to come afterwards. So you can't really understand Western philosophy in all its three or four traditions. So for example, here is Aristotle, and if you have, for example, so modern philosophy, then you have late antiquity plus Rome, and then you have Christian and Jewish tradition, and then you have Islamic tradition. For all these traditions, even when they are reacting against him, you can't understand their reaction, obviously, without understanding Aristotle. And these traditions obviously were heavily influenced by Aristotle. So there is Aristotelianism, but all other tradition as well, um, especially if they are technical. Um, Obviously, there are non-Aristotelian traditions as well, but they're always relating themselves to, or they have to reckon with Aristotle. So even if you have Platonism, that Platonism has to reckon with Aristotle's philosophy. And Christian Islamic philosophy, in most part, is very heavily influenced by philosophy as well as theology, and Kalam very heavily influenced by Aristotle. You can't really understand Christian and Islamic ilm, theology and ilm al-Kalam without understanding Aristotle very deeply. And similarly, you can't understand modern philosophy because it is a reaction against Aristotle. And even, someone like Kant was very different from Aristotle and much more influenced by Plato at more deeper level, but his terminology is all Aristotelian. And even when he's giving new meaning to the terms, you can't understand his philosophy if you don't understand Aristotle's concepts, technical concepts. So that's the fourth reason. Fifth or sixth reason is that Aristotle not only institutes philosophy as a discipline, but also gives its most basic and fundamental classifications, subdivisions, and he has worked on all those subdisciplines, which are now part and parcel of Western philosophy as well as Western sciences. So, for example, just roughly, first let's talk about what can generally be described as tools of inquiry. So obviously his deductive logic has dominated logic for thousands of years. I mean, even today it remains relevant despite advances in modern formal logic. So, and logic is very important for his deductive logic is important for Kant, for example, and also in Christian Islamic theology, philosophy, and Kalam. Secondly, his informal logic also provides the foundation for much of the work which has been done afterwards. A lot of that work is very recent, really. And we'll find Aristotle, whole theory of knowledge, even a philosophy of science, and the nature of truth. In short, a method of inquiry. And he significantly distinguishes between inquiry according to different objects. So theoretical knowledge versus practical knowledge versus productive knowledge, etc. They have different methods. Then obviously he has worked on theoretical knowledge, so his metaphysics, its importance for rationalism, even to our own days. In modern philosophy, you can't really understand the works of modern philosophers like Spinoza or Leibniz without some grounding in Aristotle's metaphysics, especially in his concept. And obviously, Aristotle's categories are hugely important. His concepts. They're very important for Islamic ilm kalam, for Christian theology, and also for modern philosophy, for Kant, for example, and other philosophers. So, in a sense, it's technical terminology in different fields. He basically gives the first standardized definitions of a lot of concepts: substance, form, matter, cause, effects, etc. And those who came after him, either they adopted his terminology or were reacting to his terminology. So and then he has worked in physics, even though his physics is rejected, but we still use his concepts or react against his concepts. So the founders of modern physics like Galileo, Descartes were reacting against Aristotle, and Newton, who was using Galileo and Descartes, was reacting again, working based on this reaction, etc., for example. And Aristotle's notion of motion, potentiality, actuality, space, time, they are all crucial for understanding later development in physics. And obviously I don't need to say much more about biology because its relevance is pretty obvious. And then in practical field, ethics, his work remain relevant even to this day. Politics, his work remains relevant to this day. It's not just historical relevance. People are still Aristotelians, in ethics and politics. Or those who are not there, they have to reckon with that. In productive knowledge, rhetoric, art, etc. also Aristotle's work provide a background. If not that crucial as his work in sciences and practical knowledge and theoretical knowledge, but still it sums up at least what went before him and up to his days, for example. Okay. So for all these reasons, I think Aristotle is the obvious choice for me. If I had to focus on two philosophers, Aristotle would be my first choice. Okay, so next one I'll talk about the second one.